Okay, in this video we are going to be working on some basic data randomization and using some formulas to count for us and save us some of the trouble, and then also creating bar charts and graphs if we have time, or just graphs in general. Okay, so let's say that I wanted to start here, and so in some of your assignments I've asked you to roll dice. Let's pretend that we just want to randomize some dice rolls and make it easier for us. So what we'll do in LibreOffice or Excel, whatever you're using, is we'll start a formula here. Anytime we're using code in Excel or any sort of like processing program like this, we'll start with an equal sign, and that's telling the program that we want to create some kind of formula. And there are a lot of different functions you can use. So if I just type in R, right, you can see radians, rand, rand-inv, and 24 more, right? In Excel, I believe it has like a full list of all the different options that you can use. And so point being here is that there's a lot of different codes we can use, and they do lots of different functions. If you're ever unsure of what one of these functions does, you can just Google it, and that's honestly how I've learned most of this. Is I just knew these existed, and then I just have slowly Googled around over the years. The function we're going to use here, though, is RANDBETWEEN. So we have equals RANDBETWEEN, and what this function is doing is it's going to generate random numbers between some sort of parameters or boundaries that we set. And so once we have our function, we'll do an open parentheses, and that is what we use to specify the details of the code or the parameters that we want to put around it. And so in this case, we see bottom and top, and so bottom is the smallest integer returned. So in other words, the random numbers we generate, what's the smallest one we want it to generate? In this case, we're going to say 1, right? Because that's the lowest number you can roll on a dice, a 6-sided dice. And then top, now it's saying the largest integer returned. We're going to say 6. Oops, not a caret. 6, right? Because we're doing a 6-sided dice. We're going to close our parentheses, push enter, and then there we have it, right? So we rolled a 1. And an easy way to do this multiple times is to just click this little square in the corner and drag. And so let's say we want to do this 100 times. So we're going to drag it all the way down here to 100. It's moving nice and slow for us today. Okay, so now we have a bunch of random dice rolls. And what we can do here is, you'll notice if we input anything to the sheet, as the sheet refreshes, it's going to redo these rolls. I keep pointing at my screen thinking you can see my fingers, but you can't. So I need to remember to use the mouse, right? So anytime we refresh the sheet, like say I want to delete this D, it's going to redo that. And so each time the sheet refreshes, you enter a command or remove something, whatever you're doing, it's going to refresh that. And so for the sake of our example, let's just say that's going to annoy me, and I want just to keep the values that we've already randomly generated. What I'm going to do, I'm going to open a new sheet. Or first, let's rename this. I'm going to call it random. And let's open a new sheet. And I'm going to call this rolls. Okay, then what I'm going to do, see, you can see it already refreshed itself again. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to go to rolls. And I'm going to select the column and do paste special. And what I want to do here is values only, right? And so that means that it's just the value or the number that was in the original cell. I don't want to copy the whole equation or formula that ran between function. I just want to calculate the values, or to copy over the values, right? So now we can see that in our original sheet, if we click on any of these cells, oh, and you'll notice everything there was just highlighted. I click the escape key on my keyboard to get rid of those highlights. If we click on any of these, we'll see that it's always giving us this formula, right? That's how you can see the input line shows the input behind whatever's on the sheet in front of you. And so here we can see that it's still calling that RANDBETWEEN function. So on our roll sheet, though, it's just the number, right? There's no longer a function behind it. So I can do whatever I want to this sheet, and it's not going to change these because they're just values at this point. Right, so I did that. And now what I want to do is I want to count the number of rolls within here, right? We could go through, and if I asked you to say, okay, how many times did we roll number 1 in these dice rolls? you could go through and count and say, okay, there's 1, there's 2, there's 3, and so on, right? Or we can make our computer do our work for us, because that's a lot easier and simple, and we are lazy humans who like to do things the easy way. Right, so let's make a little table here. I'm just going to say roles and frequency. And roles, I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right, for the 6 sides of the dice. Frequency, we're going to do a COUNTIF function. Right, if we just do a count function, then it's just counting things, and it'll just tell us that there are 100 rolls. We already know that, right? We want it to count if it rolled, in this case, a 1. So we're going to say equals COUNTIF, open parenthesis. Now we're saying the range of cells to be evaluated by the criteria given. In this case, we rolled 100 times, and let's go ahead and double check. Yeah, so we went from A1 at the top to A100. And so we could type that in here, or what we could do is we could highlight that. So let's go ahead and highlight. Make our life a little simpler. I guess I don't know if it's simpler because this thing's moving slow. Doesn't want to scroll down. But for the sake of example, let's do that. Okay. So we have COUNTIF. And in this case, we can actually see what we're highlighting. COUNTIF A1 to A100. Criteria. The criteria to be applied to the range. We'll just say if it rolled a 1. And then we can see 16 times. Right? And so now if we click and drag, what just happened? You'll see what changed is that it didn't change. It didn't know that we wanted it to check for number 2 here. It just thought that we were moving our selection down as we were moving down in the cells. So that's why clicking and dragging works sometimes, but it's always important to double check what's happening behind the scenes, right? And so here, what we don't want to change is the range, right? What we want to change is the criteria, right? From 1 to 2, 2 to 3, and so on. So let's go ahead and delete those. And we're just going to type each of these by hand. So equals COUNTIF. The range was A1 to A100. Criteria now is 2. Right? And let's just continue that for all of them. A1 to A100, 3. COUNTIF A1 to A100, 4. Equals COUNTIF A1 to A100, 5. COUNTIF A1 to A100, 6. Right, and there we have it. Nice and simple. What are we doing on time? Yeah, let's go ahead and create a quick chart here. So we have our rolls, we have our frequencies. That just saved us a lot of time and energy. We just randomly generated 100 dice rolls and had Calc. I keep wanting to say Excel. We had Calc calculate, hey, that for us.